right, so welcome once again to the podcast presented by Trynyty. As usual, my name is Cody Lacroix, one of the co-founders of Trynyty, Canada's only ride-owned and operated freestyle scooter brand, joined along with my co-founder as usual, Mr. Lloyd Bureau.
How's it going?
Man, I'm stoked. We've got the TV working this week, and we actually have two firsts for this week, Lloyd. I'm not sure if you're aware. This is our first virtual guest, and this is also our first guest who is not doing their very first podcast. I'm talking about one of the OGs. He's part of the very few who are still riding after having wed. Also part of the rider-owner clique. The one, the only, from Austin, Texas, Mr. Legendary Matthew Ogle. Matt, can you hear us, my man?
I can. Guys, thanks for having me.
Man, it's an absolute pleasure to have you in. I know Lloyd, he always loves doing the podcast, but when I said, we should try to interview Matt, he got extra excited. I know you've been a big inspiration for him. Lloyd, how about you intro the man for us?
Yeah, well, Matt's the main reason I'm a big part of scootering today. If it wasn't for finding scooter insanity and all of your videos when I was like 11 years old, I never would have thought that this was possible. So, we've exchanged over the years, got to meet a couple of times in person, and those were all really great moments. But it's been awesome to see you continually push yourself and be a part of the scooter community. So very happy today to get the opportunity to have a conversation on our podcast and get to hear a little bit more about your story.
Cool. Thanks, brother. Yeah, you've, you're always one of the people that supported me more or less. Like, I always feel like you were for me and had awesome feedback for me whenever I posted videos ranging from like 05 to now, more or less. So yeah, dude, it's really nice to talk at this point in life and to, get to be interviewed on the Trynyty podcast.
And I was a big fan of your sponsorship quest. Every time you would release a new micro sponsor video, I was like, I think this one's the right one.
This is the one.
It's got to be.
This is the one.
Number 5, man. Number 5. That's got to be it.
Exactly.
We'll put the link to number 5 in the description for sure. So for anyone who hasn't missed it, you're definitely going to want to check that out. So I want to go to the very start, Matt. What is your earliest memory of the piece of metal we all refer to now as a scooter?
So for me, earliest was when it came out, year 2000. I was 12 years old at the time, and for Christmas that year, I got it was called an X Games scooter. It was the Razor knockoff because at the time Razors were going for $100. My dad's super cheap, something that's also been kind of ingrained in my life. But yep, so I had the 2000. I was riding around, pushing around this little X Games scooter.
And that was the first time you had been introduced to a scooter. And at what point did it shift from just a hobby into, wow, this is, something that not only I enjoy doing, but I want to continue to do. And this is something I could, push myself at learning to do.
So I did that, the X Games, just pushing around X Games craft scooter for like 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then, my big milestone is 2002 summer. That's when I landed my first tail whip. It was still on the X Games scooter. I was, just dicking around, and boom, there you go, landed a tail whip, and that changed everything. So at the time there was, I didn't even know tricks could be done. There's this like neighborhood legend. His name's Taylor. I forget his last name, but this kid had claimed he had done like a Manny dub whip on a curb in like 2002, and I was just dumbfounded. What? Didn't know tricks were possible. Didn't know that level of trick would be possible. So yeah, I started goofing around and landed that tail whip, and then from that point on, I realized the scooter I was riding was not capable of going any further. So, at that point going forwards, I broke a lot of scooters. So have you ever heard of like Sharper Image?
Yeah, I think so.
I actually have it. Yeah.
It was like this tech shop, and they sold, massage chairs and so on and so forth. But when scooters were, a hit, they were selling their own scooters too. But they had this warranty to where if you broke your within a year, which I broke them every 3 months, you could get a free scooter. And you just have to keep buying the $7 warranty that came with it. So yeah, pretty much like landed the tail whip to start going through these Sharper Image scooters, and that's really what started kicking me off.
That's so cool, man. I can remember and we've touched on this before on the podcast, but for a while, the struggle wasn't like to learn new tricks. It was to keep a scooter rolling that could actually work, and then making any mods you could. And I can promise you in my area, at least, there definitely wasn't any $7 warranties that you could keep getting your scooter replaced.
Man, that's $7 loophole. Like it explains a lot of things. I was like, how does he keep riding scooters? They break all the time. Like that's, I figure you also with all the resources we had on Scooter Resource, which I just clicked now, that's why it's named that way. It's a resource for us.
Yep, makes sense.
Where we could get all the information on how to, make our scooters stronger, modify them to add rails on the sides and all that. And, that when you put me on to Scooter Resource, I discovered a whole new world. But that $7 loophole, I wish I'd known about something like that.
I'm jealous too. So touching on Scooter Resource, how were you first introduced to that, Matt?
So once I started doing tricks, I started obviously surfing the web. It was like honestly a brand new thing at the time. So I was just looking all over, what is scooter related that can help me further, help me learn new tricks, introduce me to riders that might be local, which there were none. But
right.
What was the question again? Yeah.
How you got introduced to SR?
Oh yeah. So surfing the web, boom. SR came around at a certain point. I don't even think there was a person that told me about it because I was literally like ground zero in Texas.
Yep.
So yeah, I didn't have any like sources at that point, but found Scooter Resource maybe like 2003. And I think that maybe it was from one of the Anarchy dudes. Like if you remember, like Sean Griffin, Tim Moeller, Casey Murphy. Yes. Those guys are all, I think they're in New Jersey, but Brian Boston, they're a little clique.
Right.
But yeah, so they were dropping videos called Anarchy and Anarchy 2, but like I had found Anarchy and it was so funny, bro. It was like 240p, and just looking back at it now, it's like I remember when I downloaded it on my grandma's computer and she had dial-up, so it took literally like half it. I know, bro, and it was like a full length. So at the time that was
it took like 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. It took half a day to download and blah blah blah. But I found Anarchy, and then probably through like looking for the videos, maybe even through some of the Anarchy crew, because I know we had talked early on. Maybe they introduced me to SR, but I'm pretty sure I found it on my own.
Damn, that's pretty wild. And obviously, Lloyd has mentioned scooterinsanity.com on this podcast before. Was this before or after or around the same time that you had stumbled across Scooter Resource?
We were right after, more or less. I think Scooter Insanity started in 2003. Mm-hmm. So.
And how long did that run for? What was the origins of it, and like who did you start it with, or was it just you?
So it was me, and then like neighborhood kids, just a neighborhood crew. It just wasn't the way it is now. Right. But you had neighbors that rode that could tail whip, double tail whip, and so I was fortunate enough to have like my whole clique at that time when I was 12, 13, 14. We were all just neighborhood kids that were like, we love Jackass. We love extreme sports, that in general. So we all started riding scooters together, and hence Scooter Insanity just kind of happened. We loved filming, and
yep.
I don't know. Yeah, I was like, let's make it a website. Let's make it a little clique, a crew.
Sweet. And so you said around 2002, 2003, you had thrown that up there. And how long did it run for?
Ran until about 2008.
Cool. That's awesome. And I know, Lloyd, you had mentioned that before. Any memories of Scooter?
Man,
that you want to
Scooter
share?
Insanity, I actually kept up to date for a very long time. I was always looking to get a T-shirt, by the way. Like, if you have any lying around, we got to
do some now.
Do some sort of swap.
Do some now.
But
100%.
Yeah, like I'm sure you would sell out of a batch. Everybody loves Scooter Insanity. That's been around the sport for long enough. And when I first discovered the website, I saw one of the videos you had made with your crew, and right away I saw all the tricks you were doing, and first time I seen a triple tail whip, let alone a tail whip. And I just went outside right away and got it like a couple tries later. So that was a huge catalyst to everything that transpired after, starting the brand, starting the online store, getting into scootering, making all these videos. And but all the Scooter Insanity videos, I actually had them all downloaded. I had them on my PSP. So I would watch them during family trips in the car on long rides, and I was like visualizing the tricks. And my objective was like, if these guys are doing it down there, like I gotta learn all these tricks. Like we have to do it. And one of the biggest thing for me was I saw that you were riding mostly ramps and street and a couple skate parks here and there. But when I saw that you were building ramps and just riding in the street, I was like, how did I not think about that? Like, I could build legit ramps. I don't need to take pieces of wood and just jump off with, whatever I can find. We could actually make it a project. And my dad took some time with me to build some ramps, and then I beat them to death. And that was the main inspiration for me, was the fact that you can actually go outside, do these things, and be creative. So that's really the impact that it's had on my scooter development. Yeah.
It's so dope, man. Yeah, that was what it was. Like it was the same thing. My dad, he loved introducing me to like he's an electrical engineer, so he wanted me to learn at an early age how to build ramps. Like I was not interested in anything but scootering, so obviously he put two and two together. He's like, oh, this can be a way to teach my son how to do that. So him and I built the few ramps that we had. I think we had two or three. And then we just over the years like accumulated. Like, dude, I remember there was this like box. It was a skate box that was just on the side of the street. It was in like a gutter, and we just carried it like it was probably a half mile, and we carried it to my house, and we just put it in the front yard, and like we would just accumulate crap that little my house, like the little skate park. So yeah, it was again, I'm glad that it was like a catalyst for you. It was the same thing for us. We never had a box, we never had a rail until we found all these things and just put them together.
Build your own, make your own DIY skate park. Like that's what I loved about it. You build all your features, it's yours, and you just shred it with your friends if you can find any that ride a scooter 10 years ago.
It's also cool that it was able to show people like, yes, you can do this. Because I can remember the very first time my buddy Reese, who lived 2 doors down from me, he skated, and his dad owned like a metal shop. And they made like rollers, but they had a welder and they had all the equipment. And he made us a small little rail. And we were both hanging on the skateboard, and I hadn't even tried it on a scooter yet, because this was right when I was really starting to think like, oh, this could be a thing. And I was like, is this even gonna grind? Is it even possible to like slide this thing without dying? So I started literally just right beside it, hopping on, and then slowly getting more into it. And then I think like not that long after, I came across Scooter Resource and found these videos of everyone going like absolutely insane. So I was like, okay, so not only can you definitely do this thing that I was skeptical about trying, but you can take it way farther than I even thought. So it's cool that was like the introduction to like inspiring someone and showing them what's possible. And it's almost crazy to think about how different it's become now with like the access to endless bangers every single day on Instagram and stuff like that. Like what do you think the positives are versus the negatives to like that sort of switch towards the consumption of like a ton of videos on Instagram versus back then they were very few and far between?
We got a visitor.
Shout out the dog.
I know. Apologies in advance, guys. Yeah. So my pug Carlos and then my hound dog Boudreaux. What's up, Boudreaux? They're you can't see him, but
we can see his head.
Bring him up.
First dog on the podcast.
Carlos, come on. So he'll be coming in and out of this video, but
Carlos.
What's up, buddy?
I'm inclined to not talk much like on this subject because they both have positives and negatives. Like positives of the past was that every video had weight. Every video was surprise that you
cut out there.
You weren't
Sorry.
expecting it. Like,
can you go over that? You
okay.
just cut out for like 10 seconds.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So like in the past, they essentially had a lot more weight. Like every video that dropped had weight attached to it. It was like, there's a new rider.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this person? Where do they come from? Are they good? And it was exciting, especially when I remember, like, for me, I was 15, Brian Boston and Tom Verdi, like, they would drop their own little videos, but I remember they made, like, a run of them, like 3 or 4 of these, like, little 5-minute videos with them that were bangers back at the time. And it was something giant to look forward to. And you have that now, but the disadvantages or the cons to having all this now is that it's almost exhausting. It's discouraging and exhausting. It's like, and again, I'm not sure, that you see a banger that it's just like, I don't know, it's not as exciting. It's like you expect, there's going to be 3 bangers that dropped every day.
Right.
Instead of, I don't know. So it's like, it's a certainty versus uncertainty thing, which the uncertainty of knowing like who's the next rider, that exists, but the B is a shredder. That makes it a lot more fun to follow, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's a lot more, I don't know. I guess it's just a lot less. What's the word here? Like, okay. Also, on a side note, for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, it's kind of depressing. Like, I don't know. I think it's like you see all these riders. It's not about comparing yourself, but everybody always compares yourself just a little bit.
Yeah.
So
slightly, yeah, for sure.
Just a little bit, and you can't help it. That's like it's human nature. But you see these videos, and you're like, how are these so good, bro? I forget who it was, but there's this like young gun on freaking Envy, I think, and he just recently dropped this flow part that was
Matisse.
That was it.
Yeah, Matisse Nerud. Yeah.
Huge handrails to manuals, like this kid, and I'm just like, he's a child, like, like how did anyway? So yeah, but then there's pros as well. Like it's really cool to see, the kids now are learning that anything's possible. But in my head, which is good for Instagram and constant bangers, but in my head, it's like we know anything's possible. I know it's like I
Yeah.
don't know. It's
Yeah.
like it's like I don't know. I wish that these possibilities were spaced out more, maybe. Anyway,
Yeah,
but
it's-
obviously you get a banger, you're gonna post it pretty.
And
pretty
like
promptly.
back then, we would spend weeks waiting for a mini video to come out, as opposed to now, like you have so many coming in at once. It's such a huge volume of information. You can't even keep up with it.
It's an oversaturation. Yeah.
It might be a bit of nostalgia, but I would much rather go back to waiting for a mini video than like just scrolling through Instagram and just getting, yes, it's amazing to watch. It's lost a bit of its magic, and we got to find a way as a sport, as a community, to reignite that. And I think a big part of that is just getting together. And street jams are a big part of it. Competitions, making video projects. I think that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously touching on street jams, this is, just recently you had the 6th annual, I believe it was, Austin Street Jam, right? Yep. And how did it go this year compared to other years? Is it something you plan on doing again next year? How's it been? I know, like I mentioned at the start, this isn't your first podcast, and you did touch on that with the episode of Tandem with Dylan Caston. I'd invite anyone who hasn't heard that to go give it a listen. It was a really awesome listen. But for anyone who hasn't or doesn't know, how was the Street Jam this year? And obviously, do you plan to continue it?
Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of background. Won't be long. So the Austin Street Jam started like 6 years ago. This is our 6th annual.
Yep.
We've been running it every year, and it's the whole gist of the Austin Street Jam, and kind of like, I don't know, we'll get to this later, but like my take on riding and a lot of the Texas riders' take on riding is like we love inclusion. Okay. So we love inclusion. We love our scene, and there's more to it, but like that's one of the highest levels, one of the highest contributions that we can give right now is that we don't like. It's so good to be the best rider, to have a great trick selection, to be a great rider. But at the same time, like it's also just about riding. And so the Austin Street Jam, I think, brings a lot to the table because we have great riders in Austin and in Houston or in Texas. But at the same time, we've also just got homies. Like so many homies don't even ride anymore, and they still come out to these events because they know it's going to be a good time.
Yep.
It's going to be small enough because we usually have 100 or less riders. Like it's generally between 60 to 100 riders.
Right.
And that opens up this space and this, and because we're all homies, this comfortableness to just go ride for fun. And whereas a lot of other street jams it's all like the heavy hitters are throwing out, bangers constantly, which again, like we need and want at the jam. We're like, somebody else throw down something crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like the whole point really is more so like, we're just gathering together for a good time. And so throw down if you want, do your feeble to heal with, whatever it is. There's no normal trick. There's no, we're just happy that you are out riding. It's about getting all the riders together, everybody feeling like we're a part of something.
Yep.
And then just doing it.
Well, I think the word you used at the start is actually a perfect description. It was inclusion. I mean, the more people that are coming out, and when you have events like the Austin Street Jam, that this is the 6th annual and everyone loves it, it gives everybody that one thing, at least one thing in the year. You're going to keep scootering because there's at least that one thing you're going to go to. That's going to be fun. It's going to be great, and it helps to grow the scoot culture. We actually had Ruben from Machiavel do the podcast in French a couple episodes back, and one thing he touched on a lot was scoot culture, because he was explaining that what he finds really cool about it is, especially in France, a lot of the dudes, they'll almost spend more time together off of their scooters than they do on their scooters, and he wanted to explore sort of that side of things. And it's events like yours that bring people together that's ultimately going to help to grow that culture, as long as it's as inclusive as possible, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool
Awesome.
to see a variety in the street jams that we have. Like they're some look like legit competitions, others look more like ride days. And I think it just makes our community, our sport, that much richer, that there's all this variety of events that you can attend. And usually it's always the same handful of guys that are getting flown out, by their sponsors. And, thank God we got all these sponsors that are involved still in the community and creating these events and bringing those guys out there, because it's inspiring for the scooter community at large. And it just shows kids that, do what you love just because you love doing it, and get together, go outside, and just have some fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's it been like? Obviously, you've got the Austin Street Jam going, and we'll get to Brother a little bit later on. But I did mention as well, you're part of the very few riders who are married and still shredding. I'm sure there's at least a few others out there. But what's that transition been like into the family life versus, the scooter bro into, now you're a husband?
Yeah, dude, this is a topic that I absolutely love it. Like, I don't know, like Lloyd, if you even, or Cody, like if y'all even remember, for me, like on the SR forum boards, I was a hopeless romantic growing up. I love the idea of love, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, so on and so forth. But that's just who, kind of ingrained into who I am. And although I have definitely, as a human, grown up in the sense of like, it's gone from like hopeless romantic to like this like hopeless romantic rebellion a little bit in college, where I just like was figuring out what I was looking for, yada yada. Now I've found that person, and it's kind of like shifted back to this hopeless romantic where I just love being. I mean, for me, everybody's got their own marriage, but like I can undoubtedly say that I love marriage, love my wife, and so like, that tops everything. So my faith and my wife and my friends, like those three things are most important.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, man, like it wasn't hard for me to make a transition from going to not married and riding to married and riding, because to me, as I was dating Jen, who's my wife, like we've been like best friends / dating since 2008. We met
Right.
on our first day at orientation in college. So I was like lucky enough to just meet her super early on, and we developed a super deep friendship at first, and then it turned into a little bit of a mess here and there with like dating, not dating. We had that 3 times, but on this, this third time where we dated, it was 2015. We started dating again. It's like, dude, she knows me so well, and she knows that I ride. There's no secrets here. Like she knows that every weekend or during the weekdays, but like nowadays it's definitely just like weekends. I'm going to film. Like I'm going out. We're gonna go travel. We're gonna at least stay in the city. We're riding on the weekends.
Yep.
So that transition wasn't that hard because, as I've gotten older, riding on the weekdays, like, I mean, like real talk, like I went to college, and I did engineering, which took a lot of time. And so it wasn't a sacrifice. It's just that it's time prioritization. Mm-hmm. So it's like when I'm in college doing engineering, like I am not smart. So that means I have to put more time into getting and then riding comes after. So I kind of like established these grounds as I've been going. And then, I don't know, same thing with marriage, like get married. It's like, okay, like marriage first, riding after. So yeah, so at this point, what it looks like is, I'll work Monday to Friday, Friday at like noon. And then honestly, if we got plans to ride, I'll probably, I might dip out early,
Right.
but, yeah, but, so I'll like work a lot, maybe ride the skate park once during the weekdays, and then on weekends, Friday and Saturday for sure. The Austin crew, like the homies that ride here, or maybe even Dallas and Houston, like basically the brothers, like whenever we coordinate to meet up, like we'll make that happen Friday and Saturday. Yeah, and then all the other time goes live. Yeah.
No, that's really good that you've found a way to make everything fit together. I remember in Dylan's podcast, you were mentioning that it's kids, they grow up, their whole idea is they want to get sponsored, they want to get some following, and they're once they get to that transition period where it's time to pick a career or go to college, and you got all these time constraints.
Yep.
And it's like they feel like a failure because now they're pulled by life into all these directions that bear responsibilities, and they're like, well, I'm not sponsored, I'm not earning my living riding a scooter, so I'm a big failure. But no, like you're only a failure if you stop doing the things you love.
Right.
And that's like the main takeaway I took, and I thought that was so well explained. And I see you doing it right now. We hear you talking about it. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it just brings balance to the whole situation.
Yeah, there's no reason you can't do both. And the more people there are showing the next generation coming that it is possible to find that work-life, family balance while still including scootering, it's only going to help to, again, grow that culture. Shout out to the dogs.
Dude, they're going to bark a lot. But yeah, dude, well, I'm glad that y'all resonate with that. I think that, we'll just kind of get into the weeds here, but I think that it's there's a lot of opportunity to be sponsored, but there's not a lot of opportunity to be paid. And I've
For sure.
told my riders, like, guys, y'all are super talented, but at the same time, like, I would be foolish to advise you to fully go into scooters thinking that that's going to bring your income.
Yep.
So I don't know, like, I guess that's one of my thoughts as well, is that, okay, one of my underlying thoughts of scootering is that we need the sport is only going to grow if riders such as y'all, such as myself, continue to ride throughout time. And a lot of people will get burnt out on riding if that is their primary focus, because it's not going to, again, like 0.5%, 0.2% of riders can make money off of this, and especially over time, as companies, as the scene, as the industry becomes more stable, riders are going to get more opportunities to get paid.
Yep.
And that's definitely going to happen. And I encourage all riders to follow their dreams. But following your dreams doesn't have to mean that you sacrifice your safety net, which can be whatever you want it to be, for your career, or for, basically like the primary way in which you can make your income. Yeah.
Yeah, I think funny enough, we touched on like how few scooter riders there are that are married and still riding. I would argue that there might even be fewer who earn enough through riding to make a real living. I bet there's even less that do that than who are married, and that's something that is important for kids to understand. Like, you totally should aspire to be good at riding. You should try to push yourself. It's great to have the idea of wanting to be sponsored, but that also needs to not be your main reason for motivating you to go ride. It should be about the community of it, getting to chill with your friends, like doing something that you're passionate about, not because there's potential to have that validation of being sponsored. It's not that validation that should be your source of motivation. You
got to find value in the process.
100%, yeah.
And I think that's really the main takeaway is understand that when you're growing up and learning those tricks and pushing yourselves, you got these objectives that are super ambitious and they're driving you and they're pushing you forward. But when you fall short of those extremely ambitious objectives, you can't beat yourself up. It was already amazing that you got this far.
Yep. And worst case, you do what we did. You don't get sponsored. You just start your own company. Am I right, Matt?
Did on. I sponsor myself. But completely agreed. Like, everybody contributes to the scene. And to be honest, like, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of getting, like, to the younger riders, in my opinion, it's a little bit lost on them how that's so. But to the older riders and the younger riders that will grow up and will become older riders, it's not lost. You riding and you being as good as you can be, and you evangelizing your riding and really honestly trying to be the best rider you can be, put out the best parts you can be, contributes so much to our scene. And that in itself is enough to be proud of. And that's kind of where, I'm at the age where I was like, dude, like many years ago, I accepted that, like, my time to shine is gone. But dude, I'm still going to try to put out gnarly stuff. Like, dude, I am
and
so
you have
broke
been,
right
by
now.
the way.
Thank you. I am right now. I'm so broke. Like, I'm 2/3 through filming my next part for, like, my brother full length, and I'm so broke off. But that's because I'm 29. I'm going as hard as I can to make sure that I'm still I do it, and I just love it, to be honest. This isn't even like I'm excited just thinking about it. Dude, in like 3 weeks we're going so my wife and I are going to Austria tomorrow.
Damn, we timed this well, didn't we?
Oh yeah.
It's perfect. But we go to Austria tomorrow, and already, like, in the back of my head, like, I'm very excited to get home and have Christmas break to go film. I'm already designating a week of vacation to go film, finish up this part, and let my body heal because I'm broke off right now. But like, that's the way that riders, and not to self-evangelize, but like, that's the way that I think that riders need to see your put out as much of your free time as you can into filming parts, or basically just doing whatever you get joy out of that you feel like contributes to scootering or to yourself.
Yep. I think that's super important too. You just said at the very end there, it's something that brings you joy. And at one point when I was at university, it was my first year, I had one buddy who BMX'd, but besides that, there was no scooter scene in Ottawa, which was where I was for school. And ultimately, I ended up only riding a couple times that year. And I had a really rough year. I was like super down, and I know it's not the only factor, but it definitely was a big factor that I no longer was riding my scooter once, twice a week. Even at times, it wasn't even once, twice a month. And I think for me, at that point in time, I realized it was important not just because it's the thing to do. It's good for me as well to like have that source of joy and like self-fulfillment of riding. I too have been pretty broke off lately. I actually rode for the first time in like almost 3 months the other day. I've got an ankle. Got a no. I can still nose one, but I messed up my ankle riding a park when it was wet, stupidly, and I just got back to riding, and it wasn't a gnarly stash. We weren't riding fast or heavy, but I landed a full whip flat, and I've only landed about 4 in my life. So I was, and like that feeling of like, yes, I can still do this. It never goes away, and I hope that people like realize that is holding on to that like self-fulfillment, and that's like the joy you get out of riding is ultimately the most important thing.
The joy needs to come from inside, not from the external validation.
Yeah, not because you got 1,000 likes on your last post that it was a better thing to be doing.
And likes are gone in Canada since like a year and a half.
On my personal, I can still see them, but on the Trynyty one, I don't. It's super weird. I don't know what's going on with
Anyway, they're getting rid of it like everywhere, and that's going to be huge. I mean, just when it got cut off of my Instagram, I was like, yeah, you know what? We don't lose anything by not getting a number to evaluate what we posted or what, who we are, what we're showing to the world. Like, it's going to be good, and it's going to put bringing a lot of people to question themselves on the actual value of the internet's validation.
Well, that's one thing that has been super weird, and we'll get into Brother right after this. But what's funny is Trynyty right now, we're just like under 8,000 or so on Instagram, and I think it's unfortunate that often kids will judge how big they think that a company is off of how many followers they have. I know tons of brands who have triple our followers on Instagram, but are in basically no shops. Mm-hmm. So it's weird that we're at a point in time now where like the self-validation does often come from Instagram and stuff like that, and kids by default to like evaluate the size of a brand or a company, they go straight to how many followers they have and stuff like that. It's super weird. I don't know what your take on that is with Brother and all, Matt, but I know you try to keep it as old school as you can, but what's your thought on that?
So I'll get to that in a sec. Is the removal of likes, that is an Instagram and Facebook thing, right? Or it's not like some sort of like regional, Canada specific action, right? Isn't that like Instagram trying to battle depressive, like, like these likes, these young influential kids, whatever, anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Oh, did we lose Matt?
Oh,
shout out to Skype. I think we may have lost Matt. Nope, we're still here. Okay, we're good.
You broke up for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, you're back.
There.
Cool. But yeah, is that the case? Is it like trying to essentially like discourage anxiety?
Yes, exactly. So I think Instagram was rolling this out sparsely throughout the network, and they started with a few users in Canada to see the results. And I think that it has had a positive enough impact based on their recent studies that they're going to roll it out on the entire platform. I don't know about Facebook, though. So this is just a recent news I saw, is that Instagram's getting rid of it. So everybody's going to have an Instagram that looks like mine. And I'll tell you something, for everybody that's getting ready for that switch, it really won't bother you. It's refreshing. Yeah. You can really appreciate things without the filter of everybody else's opinion of it.
I'll be right back.
Well, we're going to have to fill some dead air with Matt going to tango with the dogs, but I think I read too that Twitter is actually looking to take away how many followers people have, and sort of the same thing that I was just touching on, like having kids that like will go straight to the number of followers that a brand or a rider has to evaluate how good they are. It's like you can't judge how good somebody is or how legit a brand is based off how many followers they have. Like, so I was just telling Lloyd Matt that I think Twitter as well is thinking about removing how many followers someone has as being like something you can see. And I mean, there's still going to be ways to tell. Like if someone's got 1,000 comments, obviously they don't have a couple hundred followers. But by taking that out, it would eliminate a bit of the stigma that I was talking about earlier, where like it's not a great way to judge how good someone is at riding, how much they deserve a spot on a team or not, or things like that, or whatever. It's not about clout chasing at that point anymore if there's no actual number associated to it. Like you definitely don't want to judge a brand or a rider off of how many followers they have. But unfortunately, like right now, at least, I feel like that is sort of the way that at least the younger generation is going about it.
It's just like a book that's got a cover page that's got numbers on it, right? And it looks enticing, but what's inside really is what matters. And we're noticing that with Trynyty, that we're kind of low-key growing quickly. Like we're getting into all these shops, and it's not driven by our Instagram popularity. It's driven by our passion for the sport, our passion for the community, a passion for pushing scootering forward.
And good parts.
And good parts.
And speaking of good parts, When did you decide to fully throw yourself into Brother? And for anyone listening who doesn't know, would you care to walk us through what Brother Scooters is exactly?
Yeah, sure. So Brother Scooters is our brand. It was started by me and my co-founder Theo Kotick. The idea came about, like, we've always bounced around with the idea, but we were both like getting settled into our jobs, and we were honestly just like partying, or like not partying, but we were just playing too much. Like, it wasn't all party, obviously, but this is prior to even being engaged. Like, anyway, yeah, yada yada. So we were riding a whole bunch, but it was like a whole point of like living together at that time, and riding was fun, and it didn't seem like the appropriate time to start yet, because I knew at a certain point like life would get to be more work oriented, and it wasn't there yet. I didn't even feel the desire or the craving to be like heavily ambitious with like another job, because essentially I'd be working. So I work at Dell, and I'd be working at Dell full time plus trying to start up this company while I want to play that much. Like, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, so it was like maybe like it's 29. So we started the idea at the beginning of 2018, and then I really started executing in the middle of 2018. I had, just drawn out designs. I mean, like, it's simple stuff. Like, we have T-bars. Our clamp took a little bit of design, but it was just essentially my first attempt at doing everything. It took some time to revise at least the clamp design a few times, and then we had a prototype. Prototyping went throughout a couple months as well. We went through two or three manufacturers that didn't work, and then our third, via testing, like, it showed to be of quality, of strength, and everything that we wanted. I won't get into the whole business aspect of it, but it took basically, like, it takes time because I didn't want to release something crappy.
Of course.
And then production took another 3 to 4 months. Every step took 3 to 4 months because I'm learning about it as I go. So that's kind of like when it started. But what really, I guess, pushed me learning this on my own. But anyway, so yeah, what pushed at the beginning, what pushed Theo and I to start this was just that, like, the biggest one right off the top that pushed me to do it was that I hate the misrepresentation. My point is that companies in the US are so heavily divided by location. So much California action going on. There were just so many divides in the scenes, and it seemed like, at the time anyway, like, companies I feel like have moved around a little bit from what I know, location wise. But at the time, they're just basically, Texas had no love. Texas had no base. There was just no way that these gnarly Texas riders were going to ever have a platform unless they relocated. And this is, to me, a perfect example of this is Clayton Lindley, who is huge now, has Undialed and so on and so forth, but he started out in Texas. And there just wasn't anything that Texas could offer it. And so my initial goal with Brother was to bring, I guess, like, the southern U.S., because it's not just Texas that's in my mind, because I know, like, all of our border states as well are very under misrepresented. But I wanted to bring out a platform where these riders in the southern states could be represented and could have a platform to grow on. So that's, that started it off. And then there's a whole bunch of other principles in mind. Like I think that just my take on riding, which is a lot more fun and inclusion oriented, has kind of been lost, in that I just continue to see that more and more as, from like 2015 to now. Like, it just continues to show itself more to me like that. So I wouldn't say that I've necessarily, like, battled that directly. Like, right now my major battle is, like, get into dealers. I need to keep working to get into dealers. I need to keep working on starting off and making sure that we don't die off as a company. But I have a lot of principles in mind that I think scootering could use if, like you were saying, Cody, if the scene as a whole can read and see that numbers aren't everything. So if they can see that what Brother produces is great despite us being new, despite our number game, in my head, I'm like, I think that Brother will have a lot more doors to open as to how we can change the game, quote unquote. So I guess that's where we stand at right now.
And that's why the logo is, two hands holding each other. Like, two hands holding is that sense of brotherhood, of inclusion, of connecting divided sport, kind of, right?
Sure.
Fair enough.
100%.
So, because and you touched on this that like you trying to grow something in Texas, but I don't want to take a little detour here, but there was Inward Scooters for a long time. JP Costers was running it. I used to ship him some pegs back in decade ago.
Shout out to JP, man.
And that was your first sponsor, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was something. I think what's the status right now on Inward? Like, what happened with them?
They got sold.
Dude,
right?
I closed the doggy door. They have a little doggy door, and I closed it off, and one of the dogs just ran into it, bro. It was so funny. These poor dog. It's probably the pug, bro. We used to make this joke that like anytime the pug ran into a wall, because his name Carlos, but like anytime Carlos ran into a wall, his brain would just reset. Like, and I literally think that's the case. Like he runs into it, and he's like, reset. Oh yeah, I need to go inside. Runs into it again.
Oh man.
That's nice.
What was the question again?
Just talking about Inward Scooters.
Oh, Inward.
I just wanted to touch on the topic. A lot of respect for what JP did down there and growing. They were a big part of the sport for a long time.
Yeah, they were one of the first. So where we're at now, because it's a quickie, is that JP he'd been doing the game for like 10 years, and he was killing it. More dealers come onto the scene, more competition for him. And it got to a point where it was like losing traction, and he was growing wary of it. And it's not that it was losing traction; like he still was making a decent, like a livable salary off that thing. But I think that his passion for it had grown wary. He'd just been doing it for so long. His son Rick, who I love to death, but Rick Costers, he stopped riding, grew up, and that time of life for him changed. So where he's at now is he sold it off to another guy who, like, I don't know all the background. Actually, Andrew Ressource was just telling me some of these deeds, but they're kind of private. But like, basically, I'm not sure where he's located, but this dude has a lot going on. I feel like, or like, I know. Hi, Tootie. It's my wife, Jen. You want to say hi, Jen?
What up, Jen?
Hello.
I've got a question for Jen.
He's got a question for you.
How did she feel when you first proposed the shred and wed, and whose idea was that really?
His question was, what do you think about shred and wed? Whose idea was it?
What do I think about shred and wed?
Yes.
I think it's a genius creation that includes love and scootering. And what do I think about it? I think it's creative and it's unique.
Oh, tell them about the engagement, or I'm sorry, the day before the wedding, the whatever it's called, where I played it for everybody at the.
It was something that we watched at the rehearsal dinner of our wedding.
Oh no way, that's so cool.
Up on the screen for everyone to see, and it makes for a good memory.
That's
really
awesome.
Good memory.
That's amazing. And we were talking earlier. Matt's a part of the probably less than 1% of riders who are married and still riding. And we think it's awesome that you guys have known each other long enough that you already understood that going in, and it made the transition, to the married life not that hard for him. So I think it's awesome that you're still supporting what he does, and shout out to Jen and any other girlfriends and or wives, if there are any, that are supporting the boys of the scooter world.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always nice to be with someone that has a passion and a hobby, and especially with scootering, it's not that common, so it stands out and makes for good conversations.
Cool. And how often are you stuck hearing about how Brother's going and the plans with Brothers and stuff like that? How closely are you involved with what he's got going on there?
I would say I think I'm pretty closely involved. I mean, it's something that I hear about or we talk about at least once a day, probably.
Right.
And, I see it every day in the garage, the boxes. And
the warehouse, you mean, the warehouse.
Every day. What's that?
It's the warehouse, not the garage. It's the warehouse.
It's the warehouse, yes. Just that it's the headquarters that my car can still fit into. So that's good news.
So that he's following the rules then.
Yes. Yes.
All right, I've got one more question for you, and it's the golden question. Has Matt ever tried to teach you, or can you do a tail whip?
Ooh. Have you ever tried to teach me, or can I do a tail whip? I cannot do a tail whip, but what I can do is X-ride.
Oh, shout out the X-ride. There you go. You've got your trick.
That's good.
Yes, that's it. I went down a little tiny ramp at this small little competition once, didn't I? Mm-hmm. Didn't win anything.
There you go. So you're officially a rider.
Yeah, I had a scooter, but I guess he took it apart for parts, so I'm due for another one.
I built my scooter, my girlfriend a scooter at one point, and I had to do the same thing. I had to borrow the wheels back at one point, so I know the struggle.
I'm like, what is this? This is mine. You can't take it.
Oh, man. That's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. You're actually officially our first female guest on the podcast too, so that's three firsts today.
Very nice.
Absolutely crushing it. We're gonna steal Matt back from you for not too much longer, but again, thanks for shouting us out and coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Cheers.
Can you keep the dogs outside?
We've got a dog tamer now, so we'll be good for the rest.
Yeah, well, actually, we'll be rounding out the hour here pretty soon. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Lloyd?
I mean, we could go. I think we didn't finish speaking too much about Brother and what's going on. Like, I know you guys are really involved with the event scene. You organize your little jams here and there, plus the street jam,
Which is a big event. Yep.
A big event, yeah. And you have your ride days. So, how does it work for you having your job and running Brother? What drives you to keep pushing that every day?
How does it work? I'm a super time management guy, so you have to be when you're working two jobs. Yeah. Good. I'm glad you can relate. But it can be exhausting. But yeah, it's pretty much saying like, okay, my Monday to Thursdays are always squared off. I won't get like, okay, so Monday to Thursday, I love to work. I get my workouts in, dude. It's like I do everything that I need to do to make sure that my core is good. And then Friday, and I plan ahead, for what is to come in like the months to come. And then Friday to Sunday, it's like, okay, how can we execute? Who can we end up with? So it's not too hard to manage and deliberate, but it just takes forward thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's the case. I'm not sure what the rest of your question is, but I did hear that we're running out of time. So yeah, I'd just like to say as well for the future of Brother. So we're like, it's been fun thinking it through. Like, so in the future to come, Jen and I are actually moving at a certain point, but I still want like all of our Texas riders, and so the whole point is still to be Texas represented, southern states represented. So what I see happening in the future is in 2020 we're gonna begin sponsoring a new wave of riders, and to some degree I'm going to be a little bit more open to sponsoring outside of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my head I'm reserving like 2 spots for Texas, but I'm going to try to prioritize more park riding, sponsoring, because like I ride both, but I at this point have capitalized on street. I love street. I grew up at park, as you know, Lloyd. Like I'm at so I love park, but it's for me I'm street, so I tend to go street oriented. But like with Brother, I want to have street and park products.
I think it's important,
riders
for sure.
So in regards to like riders, some of them will be park, a couple of them will be street next year, probably a little bit more park. And some are going to be outside of Texas, outside of the southern states, because we'd like to get more representation. I think that's a critical element that you kind of have to have. You can't just ignore it.
For sure.
So if we're going to...
Yeah, but I do think it's important to do what you've done and establish like a bit of a home base. We actually did the same thing with Trynyty. Our first 4 riders, I think, were all in Montreal. And then all of the riders who followed were people we've at least met or interacted with before. And I think a lot of kids shooting you probably get the DMs too all the time. Like, hey, will you check out my page? Will you sponsor me? That's really not how it works. You want to lay down a foundation, set up a good core that you sort of unites you. And for us, it's been important to keep it as a family, because one thing that we're not trying to do is be like, well, I'm not going to name any brands, but a lot of brands will throw like 50 dudes on the team at one point. And it's just, it's so far from like a family. For us, it was important to keep it as tight-knit and as, as transparent as possible. So I think you've done a good job of doing that with Brother, and it's cool to see that you're going to, branch out after that. But I think it is super important to do what you've done and lay that, home-based foundation down.
Yeah,
100%.
I think that you guys have a nice little community in Austin, and people kind of gravitated together, and it's become a bit of the heart of the scooter scene in Texas.
For sure.
And I see a lot of similarities with what Montreal has become. I didn't grow up in Montreal, but I moved there when I was 17.
That's crazy.
And yeah, I didn't grow up in Montreal. I grew up in Quebec City, 2.5 hours east actually. And so I came to Montreal to go to college, and I kept growing QC scooters during that time, and I was building a team. I was getting involved in events, creating all these events throughout Ontario, and I got to meet all these great people like Cody. And that's how we got to meet. Like, he emailed me to get a ride to an event that I was organizing. I had space in my car. I was like, let's
That's how
do
we
it.
met. Yeah.
And you know, since then, Cody's worked for me with QC Scooters for many, many years, and eventually ended up moving to Montreal to keep working
because of you. And it's crazy to think that you didn't grow up in Montreal. And I never even thought about this before. Like, this conversation, cool enough, is like you came to Montreal, and you were, not that you dragged me here, but you were like gave me that little push that I needed to be like have the affirmation.
And you
that
needed to learn French.
I needed to
well.
relearn French.
There was a lot of, there was a lot of barriers, but everybody kind of gravitated together. And on top of that, now we've got people from France, like Kevin Turgis coming in. Like, so people want to be here.
Yeah, to get back to what we're talking about, we created that home base here in Montreal as well, and it's cool that we're both not from Montreal, but Montreal ended up being the home base. So back to Brother, because we're not running out of time, but we're definitely going to have to wrap it up eventually. So you've got your T-bars out, you've got your clamps out, which I've seen. I saw a few of them at the street jam in Boston. There's a couple dudes rocking your SCS in the bars, and they look and they feel good. And I think there's actually a shop here in Montreal that'll probably be bringing some stuff in. I got some of that inside info. So you've got the T-bars, you've got the SCS, you've built your home base of Texas, and you've got your team, and you're going to branch out. What else can you share with us that you have planned coming? Is there going to be new parts, more events? What's the inside scoop that you're comfortable dishing out?
Yeah, dude, man, I wish you one more time. I'm just curious, from y'all's perspective, before I get to that, in Canada, what are the other hubs outside of Trynyty? Like, y'all are a base. Are there any other bases? Like, are they spread out?
So they are pretty spread out because Canada is pretty huge, obviously, like same as the States. So there's like the West Coast scene, but even they're pretty spaced out. Like, there's Edmonton, Calgary, and then there's a few dudes in Vancouver too. So that's sort of like the West Coast side, and North is definitely spearheading that. Shout out to North for having like that, holding it down on their end. Right. There's a small scene there's a growing scene in Ontario. But what's cool is those guys are mostly located near Toronto, and Toronto is close enough that like they all bomb down to Montreal for all of our events and stuff. So there's almost like the East Coast and the West Coast, and there's a couple kids in Nunavut and stuff like that are scootering. But I'd say that the two core scenes is like the East Coast and the West Coast, and the East Coast being primarily Montreal and Toronto kind of grouped together, and then same thing with the West Coast. You've got the Vancouverites and the Calgarians and the Edmontonians. Boom, nailed all three. So that's like the West Coast and the East Coast. That's sort of where it's at. And what's cool is we actually had a few dudes come out to the Pro Invitational we do every year from the West Coast. So it was cool to have like the West Coast and the East Coast all riding in the same competition for probably the first time, I would think.
And it's competition, but there's absolutely no beef. It's all a big family.
It's not a real
awesome.
contest. It's basically as close to a street jam as you can get in contest form.
This isn't the rap game.
Legit. Yeah. That's cool, man. So from the Brother front, I can share that, so with the Brother front, we have a fork that it's already done. Honestly, I need to start prototyping it, but I feel like my goal as of right now has been to just make sure that we drop all of our Welcome to Brother, our first wave of riders. We get all those videos out, and like we're finishing Mike DeYong's right now. So
I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, he's so good, man.
Yeah, dude.
He's such a good little manny rider. We've been filming for his. So once that's done, we go on to Austria, and we're gonna have this like giant 12-hour flight. I'm going to essentially like finalize my the fork design and get them sampled while we're gone. Like, I literally want them to be. They're not gonna be here by the time we get back, but I would love for them to be here by the end of December, so that we're definitely gonna have those in 2020.
Right.
Dex is going to be the bigger one. I've got a lot of concepts and ideas, but I've only really got like base work done in CAD. So I need to really put time towards coming out with a good park and a good street deck.
Yep.
So I'm shooting for 2020. If I can finish those designs, like, I don't want to rush it, obviously, but I'd really like to have those designs, have a lot more work done with those while we're in Austria.
For sure.
And then, it's the same concept as the fork. If I can get them done soon and get them prototyped and sampled, then we can, 3-6 months time frame, we can start doing a production batch. So that's it parts wise. Oh, and then grip tape. We're just trying to find the right, grip tape's easy, but it's like, we're just trying to find the right manufacturer for that. So I've already gone through 2, and they're both shite, to be honest.
We may know somebody, so.
Dude, maybe we can talk offline, but, I'll play it. But, so we're digging around right now to figure out the right person for that, the right price.
Right.
And then, so I think that from a part perspective, that's the focus of 2020. Dex will be, street deck would be 5. I think it's gonna be 5 in between. It's either gonna be 5.5 or in between 5.5 and 6.
Yep.
And then park will probably be a 4.75. Fork is going to fit 30 millimeter. Yeah, so that's that.
And
12 standard?
12 standard or no 12 standard on the fork?
Not sure yet.
I feel
TBD.
that.
Okay.
TBD. All right, fair enough. And sorry to cut you off. Is there anything
okay.
else? Yeah, anything else
No,
in the pipeline?
The Austin Street Jam, it might not happen next year. That's another thing. So I'll have to, I might convert it over to more like a Colorado, like a Denver. I don't know what it'll be exactly, but we'll be moving to Colorado. So we'll see what events comes with that. But obviously don't want to lose that Texas. Again, it's about Texas. So I'm probably going to assign somebody from Brother to just host some ride days, things like that.
Right. Is Dell hiring?
Dude, right? Always.
I've had that one in my back
bro.
pocket the whole podcast. My bad. I had to at least pull it out once.
Again, let's talk offline, dude. Honestly, real talk. Theo Kotick and Andy Koke, I'm not taking the credit. I'm just totally taking 30% of the credit, man. I put in references for both those boys, and they're working it down. So.
Very nice.
That's hype. And at least they'll still be around if you do decide to keep the jam going. And obviously, they'll keep the spirit of Brother alive while you're gone. And it's cool that you've been able to help bring them in and really develop the scene from the inside out, starting in Austin. I think it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I guess we're kind of rounding out the hour here. Lloyd, anything else you wanted to touch on before we say adieu to our very first virtual guest?
I mean, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Obviously, you got some really good perspectives on scootering and, work-life balance, following your passion. Really appreciate you still being a part of the scooter community. As far as I can tell, you're one of the first catalysts, handful of people that have been involved since the very beginning. And when I saw Brother pop up in 2018 on my timeline, I was just so stoked.
Yep, me too.
And I just want to tell you to keep pushing it. We really appreciate that you're still a part of this, and it's people like you that are gonna help us through this next transition in the history of scootering, where we gotta get our stuff, like you were saying, stabilized, get everybody, all the right actors together, and really push the sport to make it something that's mainstream, legit, and without it losing its essence, right?
Its values, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for talking to us today, and. Yeah.
Well, actually, one thing I do want to touch on, you mentioned you're trying to get the first wave of videos for all the Brother scooters out. I would highly recommend anybody who's listening to this whole thing that's still listening to go check out all of the Welcome to Brother edits, because they're all super, super good. And your launch video was great too. Obviously, any footage of Matt, all the OGs are going to be hyped, but I think the young kids need to see that too. There's one last thing I wanted to touch on too. Obviously, we've been referencing how it's a bit reminiscing on the video part days versus the Instagram days. And I don't know about YouTube, but I have there's a new video that dropped. It's called Cap Gun. Have you seen Cap Gun, Matt?
I haven't.
Okay, Lloyd, have you seen Cap Gun yet?
Link in description, please.
Oh, the link will be in the description. We have no relevance to them at all. I don't even know if Carl and them know what Trynyty is, but I will tell you that for the first time in a long time, no cap, as the young kids say. Apparently that's a thing. I missed it. No cap. Cap Gun is unbelievable. It is so good. Go watch the Welcome to Brother edits and go watch Cap Gun, and don't waste all of your day staring at your phone. That's like the closing message I wanted to sneak in there before we round this one out, because it's been a while since a video has literally moved me that much. It's 30 minutes of gold.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Matt,
guys.
Go ahead.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Pleasure talking to you guys. I really want to meet up with you guys. I think that'd be kind of next steps, dude. I would love to meet and combine the crews, whatever, film, just party, whatever. Down for that. Also wanted to say too, for you guys, again, offline, whatever, reach out to me. One of my biggest enjoyments of having so many friends and contacts is that we can skill swap. Or just whatever. So in regards to I love learning things from people, and I love teaching things I know. So, if I come to you guys, or if y'all come to me, just know that, or just know you can come to me, I guess. And honestly, I might come to you from time to time, but, I really appreciate you guys having me again. Y'all are the homies, y'all are OGs. Thanks for doing what you're doing, and for Trynyty, and for having me on the podcast.
Damn, dude. Well, we really appreciate that. Of course, we've got your back too. I always joked with Lloyd that someday we're gonna have to form this thing, call it the Rider Alliance. So
it's out there now.
It's out there now. Anytime you need
Can't put it back
anything,
in.
or anytime we need something
Trademark.
from you, we'll definitely swap ideas. And who knows, maybe a Trynyty X Brother collab is in the works for 2020. Maybe we'll see about doing something with that.
Yeah.
Hey, that'd be great, guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Matt. Shout out to the dogs. Shout out to Jen for making an appearance. Thanks again to Studio SF here in Montreal for letting us host what will now be episode 11 of the podcast. We're into the double digits. We appreciate anyone who's taken the time to listen to this whole thing, share it around, and most importantly, put your phone out and get out and ride your scooter.